on today's episode, I've got Tom Jeffs, who is a former commercial director of AFC Bournemouth, Leyton Orient and Portsmouth Football Club. So one day, Tom decided to quit his job after 10 years and go into property. He started as a labourer, and within a few short years, he's built up a property portfolio with his partners at Hunning Homes to 34 properties worth £3 million. So hope you enjoyed today's episode. Enjoy. Tom Jeffs, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
All right, Tim. How's it going?
Very good, mate. Very good. This is, for people that probably don't know, this is about our 15th take, so we're getting there. But hopefully this one will work now.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Technology,
fingers crossed. I appreciate it though, mate. I very much appreciate it. So let's jump into the same question I ask everyone to get us started. What's your definition of a leader, Tom?
For me, I think it's a collective of a few things, but predominantly a team. You know, you're defined. Your leadership skills for me are defined by how good your team is. You know, and the team that you can put together. I think it's an essential part of any business and any matter of life. You know, that the team you have around you is what you are, and you are only as good as your team. You know, so I'd probably say from my point of view, that's exactly it.
So tell us a little bit about how you've got started, your team around you, and how you've got into property, Tom. And just give the listeners a bit of background.
Yeah, so mine was same as a lot of people. Finished school, went to college, didn't exactly know what I was doing, ended up going to university, did a business and sport management degree, and ended up in a corporate job, you know, albeit in football. It was I'll say my dream job. You know, I'm probably not lying saying that was what I aspired to do. Obviously our backgrounds come together through football as well, and it's been a huge part of my life and you know, and everything around it. And I very much found myself 10 years into it after, you know, working at Bournemouth, moving to London and then ending up in Portsmouth. I just very much found that the corporate dream wasn't what I wanted or what I expected over a period of time. And essentially I'm an action taker. I was one of those, and I came home probably just over 3 years ago and said to Charlotte, I'm thinking about sort of leaving my job. To which she said, let's have a conversation and sort of see where we are with this. To which saying, when I said I'm leaving my job, I kind of already had, and the alarm bells for her were ringing straight away. But as with me and anything, I am driven to be a success in what I'm doing, and that led me to working for one of my best friends as a labourer on a site. I very much had an interest in property and building, although didn't have too much experience. I very much felt I needed to learn from the ground upwards. So I went, I suppose, from the outset of what everyone seemed as my dream job and what I always aspired to do, to becoming a labourer on a building site, which, I know it's hard for a lot of people to comprehend. It was the best thing that could ever happened to me. It just allowed me to clear my mind. It was very stress-free. My phone wasn't ringing, and it sort of showed me the path that I wanted to be on from there. And I suppose that was just over 3 years ago now. And I still work for, All Build Developments, which I joined pretty much after finishing that job for Arnie, in a consultancy basis from a building and construction point of view, to which I've set up a business with a couple of the chaps about 18 months ago called Hunning Homes, which is our property side. So I suppose that's a very quick fast track of the last few years.
Let's go back. It's very interesting. So you went to, because that sounds quite extreme, doesn't it? To go from your dream job in football, you spent a long time building a career, and then to suddenly go, right, I'm going to become a labourer, which is a complete different change of direction. Did you strategically think, I'm going to be a labourer because I want to get into property, but I want to know, did that play into your mind? Was it a conscious decision?
Not really. No, it's probably subconscious, if I'm honest. It's very much my mind works in a regard of, if I'm not happy with something or I don't like it, then change, and from my point of view was, I'd fallen out of love with work. I'd become that person that I never thought I'd be on a Sunday. All I could do was think about work on the Monday of, and sort of dreading it. And I didn't want to be in that position anymore. So the best thing for me is just to take myself out of that situation. And it just so happened, I put a message in the WhatsApp group, just to say, packed in my job. Yeah, what's anyone got going, but just more to let the lads know than anything. And that's when obviously Arnie came back and said, well, I've probably got 10 weeks sort of labouring at my house. I know you won't want to do it, but there's work there if you want it. And I jumped at it, and it, like I said, it was probably subconscious, but it just took all the stress away and everything else. And looking back, it went hand in hand. It gave me an opportunity to see the groundworks of a building site, all the ugly side that you don't see, not the pretty side of dressing properties and walking around in suits like you do, obviously. So
I like how you got that one in there. Just going back to the unhappiness in your job before, because it's interesting for people listening, they might have that feeling on a Sunday that they're thinking, oh, I'm really dreading going to work tomorrow. How long did you have that feeling for, and how long did it take? And then when did you act on it? Was it a case of months, years, days?
I suppose when I came down to Portsmouth, which was 2018, I always said to Shah that would be my last job in football, just because of number of administrations and other things that had happened. I just felt, that this was not the last shot. I was still as passionate about it as I was, 5-6 years prior, but I just felt that was my last sort of shot. And and don't get me wrong, the first couple of years were brilliant, but I just felt I got it to a stage where I couldn't do too much more. And I love a challenge. I'm not that sort of person who can just sit there and tick things over on like a 9-to-5 basis. I need a new challenge, or a fresh challenge, or some targets to hit. And I just felt I got to the point where I couldn't take that any further.
Do you think it was a case of you were thinking about it for months? Or
it was on my mind for a while. It was on my mind for a while, and it hadn't got to the point where it was eating me up inside. So I sort of was thinking of alternatives, looking at what I could be doing. And I knew I wanted to be self-employed and have a go at setting up a business as such on my own. And that hadn't really crossed my mind, even to the day when I left, because that was it for me. I've made up my mind, so I went in and decided to leave. And like I said, I knew I'd make myself succeed in something else, but I felt I needed to get out of that to take that positive step.
Tell us a little bit about your your start at Hunning Homes. How did you set that up after doing the labouring? How did you set up Hunning Homes? Tell us a little about the team that you brought together. Just give us a bit more info on that.
Yeah, so I joined All Build Developments, which is obviously a Bournemouth-based company, building construction. And that led through to Hunning's Homes, to which obviously Joe, Jordan and Taz, the four of us, I should say, are partners. And it was just a conversation around the table. Those three had been trying to get a property business up and running for a number of years. And I think, not without blowing my own trumpet, but they needed someone like me who wasn't in the trade, that could take things further from a business perspective and bringing deals to the table and the networking side. And equally, don't get me wrong, I needed them just as much. For me, the building element was a scary part of it. I speak to property investors every single day, and the biggest issue everyone has is builders and reliable builders. So again, at that point in time, I probably didn't realise how powerful it was that I had met the people that I needed to allow me to, do what I needed to do, rather than taking it on my own. And, we had a couple of meetings. I'd been working with the guys for a year plus anyway. I'd known Jordan for a long time, and I just felt it was the right step. So I sort of joined the company, although it was a dormant company, and yeah, we just agreed to chuck £25,000 in each and sort of give it a go, really.
So just so it's clear for listeners, what did giving it a go mean? What were you trying to give a go? Start building a property portfolio?
At the time,
just do a flip? At
the time, I don't think I know. There wasn't a plan. there wasn't a business model. I don't think they knew either. The talk was doing what the company's forte was, which was taking a bungalow, turning it into a chalet with 2 or 3 bedrooms and bathroom ensuite upstairs, etc., and flipping it on. And I think the first conversations we had were just prior to COVID, and then when we looked, it pretty much was COVID. So it was very much like, is that a sensible strategy when house prices are going to massively drop, or so we thought at that period. So we had to look at sort of alternative strategies. The good. Did you guys
consider putting the money back in a different account and saying, actually, COVID's just happened, maybe we should actually do a rewind here?
Maybe we should just take our money back and fold the business before it started.
Or were you too excited?
Nah, I think we were too excited.
Yeah,
COVID wasn't going to stop from that point of view. The way I saw COVID was like, well, if house prices are going to drop, there's going to be more deals out there. There's going to be, a lot of, I say property investors as well, but a lot of people would have that almost scarcity of investing at, it's a fact. When times get tough, like the last recession, for example, people drop a lot of their disposable income. A lot of the things they usually spend their money on, they stop. So predominantly people will not invest in property if it's a falling market, whereas actually that's a really good time to acquire stuff. You look at some of the people during the last recession, they made multi-millions of pounds overnight by investing at those periods of time, because you're buying at a low point. And I think we were all so bought into the idea. We knew what we wanted, we knew what we were going for. It was just a case of taking that leap at some point, I suppose.
What did you guys pivot into then? So you were thinking of doing flips, and then you decided to pivot into what? Where did it kind of take you?
It was very much, what can we get for our money? And at the time, when you're putting £25,000 into something, that's a decent chunk of money, So it was very much like, well, what can we buy that's low risk? And then when we realised, within property, it's not necessarily a high or a low risk. It's all about, I suppose, what you buy, specifically what it is and what you can do with it. We found a little commercial to residential unit in Northoff Road in Charminster, and it went to auction. We lost it at auction because it went over what we were willing to pay. And it came back available a couple of weeks later, and I got straight in. We managed to buy it before it went to the next auction for just over £50,000. And I'll never forget the day. So obviously I had agreed the deal. Me and Joe talked about it a lot. Joe and then Taz came down to have a look at it. We walked down into this little lane in Northoff Road and walked up at it. And the boys were expecting we bought like a house. Or something. Joe knew obviously what we were buying.
Yeah.
And George just looked at me and went, so we've basically bought a fallen down shed. And I'll never forget that moment. And it was so true. I was looking, within my personality and the whole, wealth dynamics element, I'm a deal maker. So I see a lot of deals in things, and I see the best in a lot of people. And for me, it was very much the potential it could be. Whereas the other boys looked at it as a liability, and it's been an ongoing joke. We still laugh about it now, but that, as I know I've said to you previously, that will probably turn out to be the best deal on paper that we ever do, from a percentage perspective, because of what we were able to do with it. Yeah,
it's a funny story. The headlines to me: how to buy a fallen down
shed.
How to buy a fallen down shed. No, it's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. How did you know to go to did you plan to go to auction, or did you for people out there that want to maybe invest in property or want to get started in property in the entrepreneurial sense, buying property, building a portfolio, did you educate yourself in some way? How did you kind of know where to start?
Not really. It was. I'd educated myself, and I'm on a Simon Zucci's mastermind course, and I'm, coming towards the end of it now, and that's been a big factor within it. But it was very much a case of doing my numbers, and we did the numbers on. I think we got up to about 56,000 on paper, which worked for us. And when we went into the auction room, it went over and above that. So, it was hard not to, but we stopped where we should have and let the deal go. And then when it came back, and obviously we were able to acquire it for 52, it then became, a deal again. So I was very confident on my figures on what I'd done, because I'd run it through a number of times, and I knew the risks with auction, but we got it looked at before by a solicitor. And, when you calculate into the refurbs, we pretty much, just to run through it quickly, it was 52,000, it was 7,500 on fees. It was probably 49,000 on the refurb. We were all in for sort of just under 110, and we had that recently valued at 220. We've been able to refinance it and take all of our money back out and roll it on to the next one. That for me was the proof of how powerful this stuff is. We've bought a property, funded it all, refinanced it, so we've taken all of our money out. We've still got the property there rented, and it's earning us probably £450 a month as well, and I've been able to move that 100 grand onto the next project. So that for me, in my mind, was the proof, like I said, that all of this works. And if you get something at the right price and you do your figures beforehand, you set yourself up. There's a huge amount of learnings to come out of it as well. With regards to planning,
which is valuable as well, isn't it? That's
massive. But we knew we needed to take the jump at some point, and it just that happened to be the first one.
So you mentioned about educating yourself. Do you think you would have taken that on if you hadn't have educated yourself? Did you educate yourself before, or were you doing it at the same time in tandem?
Yeah, pretty much at the same time. So sort of what that allowed me to do is I had the network of people and experts who had done things like that. So I found, we bought it, we made the decision. There's a lot of people saying, "Oh, stay away from it," X, Y, and Z, but it had prior approval to do what we needed to do on it. The biggest thing I got out of it, which is probably almost the most expensive mistake, again, I definitely would have made in my life, was that we were going to use it as an office for the company. Because Chelmsford really well. So it's a fantastic area. It's close and it is suited for what it was. About a day before I went in to the council to put the documents into the council, someone on the course said, "Oh, Tom, with prior approval, I think if you, as it's prior approval for residential, if you then use it as commercial, I think it invalidates the planning." Yeah. So they said to me, just go and speak to a local planning agent, to which I did, and honestly, the value we had as a commercial unit was about 100 grand, and the value as a residential was obviously the 220. So that would have, I obviously didn't put it in for the next day. We just pushed through with the prior approval and got that accepted. And again, that education had paid for itself probably 20 times over, just on that one little bit of advice.
Yeah, and that was, so it would have been invalidated if you turned it back to commercial. Literally, it was a phone call to someone within the network that gave you that advice, or an email or whatever. Yeah,
it was just speaking to someone on the course, and then it was speaking again to one of the the coaches on the course, who said, "Whatever you do, don't go for commercial." And the prior approval actually expired. That was part of a certain planning which has now been replaced. So we would never have got that back. We'd have then had to go for full planning, which personally I still don't think we would have got that. Yeah, it would have been costly, and I don't think we would have even got it there. So, that for me was the power of the education on the flip side as well.
Talk to us a little bit about the education stuff. So I know that we talked about sort of investing in yourself. I know you talked to me about sort of life coaches and stuff like that before. So tell the listeners a little bit about why you invest in yourself and why you've used a life coach in the past and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think the life coach actually pushing forward a little bit, actually pushed me to do the property education as well. So it probably led on to that. But yeah, I very much got to a stage where I'm not going to say I was lost, but I'd sort of done everything I expected. I'd climbed up the corporate ladder to managerial jobs, and and at points had 80, 90 staff at Pompey and things like that. And it was very much for me, I felt I needed a life coach just to realign myself and understand maybe my values and what I wanted, because I felt everything I'd worked for university and 10 years after I'd achieved, and then all of a sudden I just gave that up overnight. For me, it was, I just wanted someone I didn't know who wouldn't judge or ask me stupid questions. I just wanted to speak to someone and sort of get some advice from their regard on my life and everything that's going on. And that for me, worked absolute wonders, because it guided me down a path that I needed to go to. It taught me what I need to be looking for, what I need to maybe not change within myself, but I need to, and again, I know we've talked about this before, but it was very much the side of, I've always been taught in my life to identify your weaknesses and work on them, and constantly work on your weaknesses and improve those weaknesses. It was the first thing my life coach said to me, and Simon, the owner of PIN and everything. It's really interesting actually, the comparables with those two, with how they just said, no, all you need to do, any of your weaknesses, you just need to scrap. You're not good at your weaknesses, and you're not good at them for a reason. He said, I know that in human nature is really hard for you to understand and take in. He said, but your strengths are going to be better than 99% of other people. So take your strengths and work on them. And funny enough, your strengths are things you enjoy, so take your hobbies, for example. So we started talking about football and other stuff. He said, if we went out and had a kickabout now, how long could you have a kickabout for? I was like, 5 or 6 hours. He said, so what don't you like? I said, I don't know, washing dishes. He said, how long could you go and wash dishes for? I said, well, I couldn't. And he said, well, that just sums it up, so you just take your time, push your time into what you do, and outsource anything that you're not good at, or you don't enjoy, because it's a weakness for a reason. And that was massive for me. And then that led on to me being pushed on to, I felt, to really be taken seriously in property. Although I backed myself and I knew I could be a success, I needed to educate myself and understand myself within property, from that regard. And that led on to the 1 day and then the 3-day accelerator course, which I did, which, from that regard changed, like I said, it changed my whole life, but it changed my whole thinking towards life and what I could do if I put my mind to it. And obviously that led on to the mastermind course as well.
What's your so you know what your strengths are, so what do you do about, because for people that work for themselves, or they can't, they've got to do maybe the things they're weak at because there's no one else to do them, what advice would you give to those people?
For me, this comes back to what we talked about at the start within your team. There's a lot of people who think, I've got to do loads of admin. Don't get me wrong, if you like admin or not, that there's certain elements that you always have to do. And there are certain elements that it would be so much quicker for you to do quickly yourself that might take you a few minutes. I'm talking about more laborious tasks where I've used, VAs, a virtual assistant, who will literally work 1 hour a week or 100 hours a week, if you want them to, in that sort of regard. So you can outsource as much or as little as you want. Or from a property perspective, have you considered doing a joint venture where, I don't know, you're the money man, Tim, and I'm the one who could bring the deal and a few other things to the table. Can we combine our skills to, take ourselves to the next level, which you enjoy the admin, so you're going to pick up that side, and I enjoy dealing with, the solicitors and mortgage advisors and that sort of element. So it's very much about breaking tasks down as well, rather than seeing everything as a collective. It's things that take your time, and it's obviously the whole 80-20 split. as well of your time, your resource, and what you've got available to you.
Tell us a bit about what do you think what are your strengths, Tom? Because I know you've been through your course and done a lot of analysing. You've analysed, kind of profiled what you're good at and, what you don't enjoy doing. What do you enjoy doing?
I've
heard the term deal maker before.
Yeah, when you said what are your strengths, I was thinking, I don't know, I might struggle here for a minute.
You're being modest. You're being modest.
No, but for me, it's very much like I went back to, this is what was brilliant about my life coach. I just went back to basics, and he just asked me 10 questions and was like, what do you enjoy doing? What do you like? And a huge part of it came back to dealing with people. Yeah, on the whole wealth dynamic spectrum, which is something you get through Mastermind, they identify what characteristics you've got, where you fit. And I'm very much in the bottom right-hand corner, which means I like speaking to people, I like dealing with people, I move quite fast, so I get bored quite quickly. So for me, it's finding deals, stacking the deals up, meeting the vendor, going having a look at the properties, and then almost, I smile while I'm saying it, but then almost my interest levels just start dipping after that point. When I've then got to phone the mortgage advisor, deal with the estate agent every day thereafter, or chase things, or do admin and paperwork, my interest levels just drop, and I haven't got the excitement to take it on. So for me, a lot of it is at the forefront. It's building the relationships and finding the deals.
Are you quite a self-aware person, would you say? Are you quite aware of how you're feeling?
I probably would have said I wasn't, but again, within the last 3 years, that I've had a massive life transformation from that point of view. I thought I was just set for life in what I was doing, but this has made me, the whole going self-employed and setting up my own business, albeit with others, that it's made me aware of a huge amount of things, and even things like the wealth dynamics. I was on the train to London thinking, like, what a load of rubbish, Like, we haven't got personality things like that where you can just put someone in a box and that is what they are, and I appreciate. So mine's quite unusual. I've got over 30% in the 3 areas, and the other area I'm dreadful, and that is quite unusual to have that. And when I went there, and again with me, I'm open-minded with anything, so I went there with no real expectation and just sort of thought, well, it is what it is. I'll do what it is and see what comes of it. And then when I was put with like-minded people and people from different, personalities, it was amazing for me to. I had a bit of a reality check and almost had to sort of like apologise to myself that I'd questioned it. And when you look into those things, I find it really interesting, and it's true, because you need to work with similar people on similar tasks, but then you need to work and leverage things onto others that aren't your skill set, but those people can help you go forward,
And they also enjoy doing that part as well, which makes a big difference.
I couldn't believe it. There are people there who enjoyed admin. I'm thinking, really? But that's who they are.
Everyone's different. That's what makes the world interesting, isn't it?
Exactly. And then when we're doing our practical thing, and you've got to phone someone while you're in there, in like a role play fashion, other people were they hated it. I could see people sat there nervously sweating, because they didn't want to phone someone. Whereas I was just I'll give it a go, and if I mess it up, I mess it up, and it was things like that I suppose did make me, a little bit more self-aware in that regard.
Awesome. Let's go back. Let's talk a bit about leadership, because I know you've played a lot of sport, you've been involved around football clubs, and I like I think we both really appreciate the connection between sport and business. Who were some of the best leaders you worked under within football, whether it's your own kind of career, non-league actually playing, or whether it was in the environment, the professional environment? Is there any leaders that stand out to you?
Yeah, I suppose it's probably people that, this is where, going back to what we were just talking about, it's probably people who have similar personality traits to me in that regard that you can relate to. Football managers from a non-league, scene. If you look at people like Kempy, you either love him or you hate him, and he'd be the first person to say that. And we get on fantastically well. And it's, you know, when I look back through my football off the pitch as such, through, you know, my professional capacity, it was people like Matt Porter, who was the CEO at Leyton Orient, is now, well, and still is the CEO for Matchroom Sport, you know, with Barry Hearn and Eddie and all of that. And those sort of people you just gel with, you just resonate with, and it makes you want to, you know, aspire and take yourself on further. And that is where there's so much crossover with sport and business, you know, particularly with individuals and all of that side. What made
is it Matt? Matt, you said Matt Porter, yeah? What characteristics about Matt made him a good leader? Can you think of some individual examples of times where he showed great leadership skills?
Probably just a sort of people person. You know, every Saturday before a match at sort of 2:00, he would just walk, or 1:30, he'd just walk around the whole stadium and go and speak to everyone. He'd go and see, you know, the cleaner in the far end of the north stand. He'd see the girls working in the south stand bar. And on my first game, he said, "I want you just to shadow me today and come round with me." I was like, "Yeah, brilliant." You know, went round with it. It blew my mind. I couldn't believe it. There was just, you know, the people who work 4 hours for the club. Matt's walking around. He knows all their names. You know, he just understood them. They felt valued within the football club and the business because the chief exec, you know, the top boy, was walking around saying hello to everyone. And it's things like that, you know, no matter how big or whatever, you know, you've got or what you're doing, he still had time just to fly around the stadium for half an hour, you know. And the reality was there was a Tuesday night and he had been with Anthony Joshua all day. He then comes down to the stadium and he's just spending time with all of these other people within the ground, you know. And that it goes a million miles, you know. He probably doesn't even know it himself, but he's just such a true person. Everyone speaks so highly of him, and it's for reasons, you know, like that.
Have you ever met Eddie or Barry Hearn?
Yeah, so my first day at Leyton Orient, we went over to me, Rob and Johnny had sort of joined at the same time. We went over to what is Barry Hearn's old house, but the Matchroom Stadium in the Matchroom offices in Brentwood. And yeah, Eddie was there, but Barry sat down with us for a number of hours and just grilled us, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just doesn't hold back. Again, exactly as he is on telly or anyone else, he is with you in person. And he just started going through figures. It was like being in an interview at school, you know, or a job interview. And he was just quizzing you about questions, and he'd go through a number of figures, and honestly, it was mind-blowing. He could he went get a calculator out, he could work out a figure in his head quicker than I could type it into the phone to, you know, on the calculator. And he's probably 70 odd years old, you know. And
it's really interesting. It's really interesting. So, what's been your biggest failure, do you think, in your career, whether it's property and how did you learn from it? What was kind of the big lesson that you learned from that?
I mean, there's probably not been a big failure in property or anything specific yet. Obviously, everything we do, we try and mitigate against risk. Don't get me wrong, there's 101 areas we could have improved things, or we could have done things differently on projects that we've done. I suppose it's difficult to describe failure, isn't it? Because how you look at failure. Other people look at you as sometimes as very successful, whereas on the outside. So I saw me leaving football as a big failure, you know.
Yeah.
And I felt.
Do you still feel like that now?
In a certain regard, only because I felt that's what I was like destined to do, and that's what everyone knows me from. I still meet people now, and they're like, "Oh, you're still working in football?" And I'm like, no, like I haven't been for 3 years, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, from the big take I've got from it is I still speak to, you know, all of the people over at Orient that you know we just mentioned. I still play in AFC Bournemouth golf days and speak to some of the people over there, and looking at setting up a business, like I mentioned to you earlier, with another player from over this way. I'm meeting Mark Catlin on Monday to go for a drink, who was the CEO at Pompey till last week. So my connections are still there. I've still got fantastic connections, but I suppose deep down, that was something I questioned myself, is it a failure that I'm not still working in football? But I just, at the time, it was all quite raw. Then after things settled down, I maybe felt that it was that way. But I just felt that my ambition and what I wanted had changed. And I suppose I needed the freedom and flexibility of working for myself, and I wasn't going to get that doing what I was doing.
Maybe that's the lesson for people, that actually your ambition can change. You don't have to just have one dream. Your dream might have been to, get to CEO of a football club in the Premier League or whatever, but actually it can be changed over time, and you can allow yourself. You don't have to feel disappointed in yourself because just because your dream changed doesn't mean that you failed at your first one. Does that make sense?
Yeah, massively. I think that is. I know loads of people who are unhappy in their 9-to-5 job, and even since I left, there's so many people who have said to me, "I can't believe, Tom, you just gave that up. You had a brilliant job, you're earning good money." And I was saying, from the outset, me inside, I wasn't happy. And equally, I'm not telling people just to pack their job in or change what they do. But for me and my personality, that's where I am. If I'm not happy, I need to make the change and needed to do it. But that's why now I say regularly, probably every 3 months, realign my goals personally, the business, professionally and financially as well. I think it's important to know where you are, what you're doing, and maybe where you want to be in all of those elements.
Do you think goal setting targets are important? And do you visualize those, or do you just vocalize them, or do you actually write them down as a team?
Yeah, massively. And again, that is something where if you'd said to me a couple of years ago, you're going to write down your goals on a piece of paper, or you're going to, I don't know, put something on a whiteboard in the office or whatever, or even say to your business partners, I think you'd have laughed. I'd have laughed at myself. But for me, that has been the best thing, because if you don't know where you're going, what are you trying to achieve, and how quick are you trying to achieve it? I want to get into property. Well, great. So where do you want to be next month or next year? And it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't always have to be financial. It could be, well, I want to work 3 days a week, or I want the flexibility. I want to work 5 days a week, but I want the flexibility to have 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks of holiday a year. Or, I appreciate financial goals come back into it, because the more money technically you're earning or what you're happy with, you can spend on what you're doing. So it gives you that freedom. But for me, goal setting is absolutely imperative. And the boys laugh, but I've tried to get them into it a little bit as well, because what do you want to do? Do you want to replace your income? Or are you happy with the job you're doing? Do you want double the money you've got? Do you want 50 times what you've got? Do you want to carry on doing what you're doing for the rest of your life? And everyone's different as well. So particularly when you're in business, you need to understand what other people want when you're in business with them together, so you can all work towards that collective.
Do you think you've naturally taken over a leadership role within your group, like with the 4 lads, obviously you included? Do you think you've naturally sort of become someone that leads for the boys?
Yeah, I think probably so. And for me, that's a really interesting one, because I've joined All Build and it's Joe's business.
Yeah.
Joe hates it when I say that, but it's Joe's bit. And he said, no, and again, this is where probably part of my ethos comes from. He's like, we're a team. He said, without you, without Jordan, without all the boys, we wouldn't have what we've got. And then when it came to Hunning's Homes, I think the boys realised that I was probably the most suitable to go on Mastermind to educate myself, because I brought a lot of the stuff at the forefront that you need, and then their value comes a little bit later in time. And they do, they call me King Jeffro. So, but it's all a part of it. I suppose I have naturally taken on that role, but equally we all know our place. There's no hierarchy. Everyone does their bit, and and
that's what makes it.
Right.
Yeah, that's what makes it
for
fun.
us.
That's what makes it a team.
Exactly.
What's the? Is there anything with property? Is there anything within property that for people listening that maybe are thinking about getting into property and believe it to be a certain way? So is there any kind of myths about property you'd like to kind of debunk now that we're talking about this video, we're on this video?
I suppose the biggest thing for a lot of people, is the taking action and the mindset. There's a lot of people I hear, I'm a property investor, I'm really interested in getting into property, but they don't really know where to start. They don't know, they don't make that jump. And don't get me wrong, it can be a scary jump. And I purely just started out by going to the PIN networking events. That was literally it. And I'm talking about potentially getting a lot more actively involved. I can't talk too much at the moment, but hopefully getting a lot more involved with that in the future. And that was a fantastic foundation for me just to get myself started. And I was so surprised when I went there. I was expecting everyone there is going to be some sort of property mogul and have 300 flats in central Bournemouth or whatever. And the reality was there were people there who didn't even own their own house. They didn't have any buy-to-lets. They were just interested in property. And for me, that was a really good grounding that a lot of the time people think to be a property investor, you have to own loads of properties. And it's, that it really is a myth that's not true. Everyone has to start somewhere. And what you'll probably find is at a lot of these networking events, 50% of the people in there have got no experience at all.
What are the 3 most important skills, Tom, that you think you need to master, you need to have in order to be successful in your area of property, which is property investing?
Can't remember. No. I think really, again, the leadership element comes in massively. I know we've talked about it quite a bit today, but the leadership, or taking ownership, should I say, of what you're responsible for, what you're looking to achieve, what you're aspiring to achieve. I think, again, a lot of people get into property for the sort of wrong reasons. Again, there's a lot of people who think I can make a quick buck, and there's no way of doing that. There's a case of building the foundations and going from there. Teamwork is massive. Having a team around you, or even being a bit more specific with a power team. For me, the biggest thing was building. And like we said, maybe subconsciously, I got in with a building team, which for me mitigated, I'm not going to say 100%, but probably for me, 95% of my risk. A lot of people said to me, oh, you're giving away 75% of what you could be doing. Whereas I looked at it as I was increasing what I could be doing by, 300% by having the lads involved with me. And I suppose probably the last thing is maybe ambition. It's what you want. What do you want to achieve? Having an ambition to drive it forward. Same with anything. You've got your own businesses that you're successful with, and you will understand how much hard work goes in behind the scenes. I've been running our property business for a year alongside a full-time job, still playing football 3 times a week and with a 2-year-old at home. So, when people say to me,
Charlotte.
Oh, don't forget Charlotte, of course. Yeah. what brings everything together. But, people say to me, I haven't got time. I can't stand that. Like, you have got time. You're just not productive with your time, and that's why for me, that's why I say ambition. If you've got ambition, you'll find time. Do you see what I mean? I appreciate everyone's busy. Everyone's got lives. You need your personal time. You need weekends away. You need holidays. You need time to relax. But for me, it was just a case of taking a little bit of action every single day. If I took a little bit of action towards what I wanted to do, I knew I could get where I want. And when I spoke to Simon about joining the course, he said the most successful people on Mastermind year in, year out are people who have got a full-time job because they're extremely busy with what they're doing.
Yeah.
and they have to be so, and I have to be so focused with my time, you know. So if I drive down to Bournemouth and back, for me, that's not, it's an hour to Bournemouth and an hour home. That's at 5:30 in the morning. That's an hour educating myself on a property strategy. And on the way home, that's an hour at 5 o'clock on the phone to people, you know, estate agents. Have you got any deals, or other property investors, or chasing people up? Do you see what I mean? So I suppose there's two ways you can look at things.
Definitely. Tom, thank you so much for coming on. For anyone that's listening that's interested in maybe understanding a little bit more about your guys' business, joint venturing, just some, you know, I know you're happy to always sort of help people, and sort of, you know, if anyone's got any questions for you, how do the listeners reach out to you? And we'll put these in the notes as well, the show notes and the comments. Yeah,
so obviously LinkedIn, I try and avoid a lot of the other social medias, but LinkedIn's a good one. I try and put progress of what we're doing through there. I've done a good post actually. We won Federation of Master Builders Small Renovation Project of the Year for the southwest of England. Amazing. And we're now going into the national one. That's for North Off Road project. Yeah. So, you know, LinkedIn's a place where I like to put any of our business stuff across, but I'm happy to put my email address and stuff in the chat box, and always happy to have a conversation, because I felt, you know, rewinding 18 months, I really struggled to speak to people who had been through what I had been through at the time. They're just not that I struggled to speak to them, there just weren't many people who reached out. So it's, you know, I always love a conversation with someone, particularly, you know, at the start of their journey. It's really interesting to see how they're getting on.
Cool. Tom, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it. Thanks, buddy.
Good man. Cheers, Tim. Cheers. See you later. Bye-bye.